All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Tim here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 131, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And today we got another one of those relatively smallish, but we do have quite a few interesting things, so let's get cracking. The first section of the week, as usual, is getting started, and we have 4 pretty nice articles here today, starting with testing an HTML canvas with Cypress. So this is a tutorial on essentially the image snapshot testing with Cypress. If you never knew that existed, so it essentially allows you to visually compare states of the app to make sure that the snapshots are the same, right? So the idea is super straightforward. And it is done via the Cypress plugin snapshots, which works in a relatively nice way. So if you are getting into end-to-end testing and you did not know about the visual testing, then do check this article out. It basically does a really good job of introducing you to testing, the visual testing, I guess, with the basic HTML canvas tests, and then shows you how you can expand this to stuff like, charts and everything else. Hey Marina, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got rewriting Facebook's Recoil React library from scratch in 100 lines. So this is another one of the articles that basically deep dives into how the specific libraries work. And this case, it's a deep dive into the Recoil library. And yeah, essentially just guides you through rebuilding the very, very basic version of Recoil with the atoms and selectors and, the way they essentially functioning internally without all the crazy optimization that actually happened in the real library. But if you want to get the gist, if you are curious as to how it works, or you wanted to learn how to build libraries like this, do check it out. It's a really good write-up. Hey Magnete, welcome to the stream. All right, I'm doing good, thank you. Continuing, we got the next article, Understanding the Event Loop, Callback, Promises, and Async Await in JavaScript. So this is for all of you people who are just starting, basically learning JavaScript, or I guess, you are somewhere in the beginning of your path, and you are still confused about things like event loop, callback, promises, and ultimately async await, right? Because nobody anymore uses promises without async await, let's be honest here. So this is one of the best write-ups I think I've seen on the topic. So if you are just getting started and you are, you want to expand or maybe try and understand some of those concepts better because they are not quite clicking for you. I know it was the problem for me. I know it took me like a few years, I think, for all of those concepts to finally click and make sense to me. And I've read like tons of articles on them. So if this is the case for you, do read through this article. It is pretty lengthy, but it does cover just about everything you want to know about the topic. Maybe this will help you make sense of all of those concepts, and maybe this will be the sort of the ultimate article that makes it reasonable for you, I guess. Reasonable is the wrong word, but you get what I'm saying, right? So do check this out if that sounds interesting. Hi, me. Welcome to the stream. Your username won't ever stop being amusing for me, I'm sorry. Anyway, continuing the last article in Getting Started section we have is, well, it's not really an article, more of a collection under the title of Examples of Large Production-Grade Open Source React Apps. Exactly as the title says, this is a list slash collection of pretty big apps that are made with React and a bunch of other technologies. So most of them are quite different in the stacks they use, but they are relatively feature heavy and can be used in production essentially. So you can just take them, install them, and use them, right? And all of those apps have slightly different architecture, slightly different decisions that go into them. So essentially, it's a really great learning point if you are, at this spot where you already learned React, but you're not quite sure how to start building really big apps with it. This is a really good collection of things such as Jira clone, or the Trello clone, or the progressive web apps that are relatively heavy, or BBC front-end clones, or AST Explorer, or whatever. There's like a ton of them. And it's really, really good learning material. Like, once you go into those, I haven't read all of them, I'll be honest, but I did go through the source code of some of those because either I was working with them, stuff like Grafana, for example, or I was curious as to how they were built, like the Spectrum, for example. And it's really interesting because, you know, once the app grows beyond a certain point, as soon as you go into the source code, you start seeing like crutches and shortcuts and to-dos and like fix me later, and they are there for like years and years, and like, yeah, okay, that's an app that's been in development for ages and nobody addressed those minor things that are probably not even a problem but still exist somewhere in the depth of the source code. So it's really interesting experience reading those, and again, you know, it's a really good learning point for figuring out how can you actually build a very big app and what it actually entails doing that. So if that sounds interesting, do check this collection out. Hi Manuel, welcome to the stream. Right, that's actually it for the getting started section. Now we are coming to the articles and news. We got only 2 here today. The first one is a pretty nice small-ish write-up on how JavaScript grew up and became a real language. Sort of a very brief history of JavaScript from its conception by Brendan Eich in 1995, right? You probably know it. He made it in like 2 weeks or something. And it was supposed to be the kind of like Java, but sort of silly little brother language, as he puts it himself. And then it sort of goes, so the article overviews how it evolved over time, going into something that was like DHTML. That's a thing I still remember learning. That was not a fun experience. And then there was XML HTTP requests. So the bloom of Ajax is what I want to say. And then, you know, the modern stuff. I think the jQuery really was the breaking point for JavaScript, because everybody finally saw that you could do some incredible things with it. Like, it really revolutionized, as much as people hate it right now, it really revolutionized how the web development was done back in, what was it, 2006 or something, right? And yeah, it's a fascinating little write-up. I mean, it doesn't really go to talk much about the modern times, so it only goes until like HTML5 and Node's conception, I guess. But if you're curious to read through it, it does give some very interesting points. And again, you know, a lot of that stuff was, yeah, pretty bare bones back at the time. So there we go. Next article we got here is 5 most annoying website features I face as a blind person every single day. This was a fascinating read. So this is, you know, a blog post by a person who is using screen reader on daily basis, and he's just writing about his experience and the problems he faces on majority of websites. And if some of those problems are pretty apparent, like for example, the image descriptions, right? So if you're building a website, please add the alt tags to image. It's not that hard and it helps a lot. Even not just to people who use screen readers, but even if I have a crappy connection, right? The first thing I see is that alt description of an image with a blank placeholder, right? So it makes sense to do that. But yeah, for example, unlabeled links and buttons is apparently a big problem. And it's curious that I don't remember ever doing that. Like, I know that if you just, you know, place a label on the button, that theoretically is labeled, but links, like labeling links and labeling buttons, I guess, yeah. So the problem is with the click here text that is non-descriptive and doesn't actually tell you what the hell is going on, right? So you have to be more descriptive or provide alternative or like alt text that actually tells you what's going on. And then there's even less obvious things such as poor use of headings that are actually not correctly structured, inaccessible web forms, which I imagine is a huge problem for, you know, the single page apps that just use JavaScript for everything and don't care much about accessibility. Auto-playing audio and video. I think that's a problem for everyone, not just people with screen readers. Like, I don't think I've ever met a person who likes when he opens a website and the audio or video just start auto-playing. Like, nobody likes that crap. Just please don't do that. But yeah, if you care about accessibility, and you know, I already said it multiple times, I think you should absolutely, even if you build a relatively tiny app for a very small subset of web users, you're very likely to encounter someone who would need those accessibility features. Do give it a read. There's, as I said, some interesting things here, and it's I wish there were more articles like this, because this was a really fascinating read. But there we go. This is it for articles and news. Now we are coming to the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. We got 3 things here today. So let's get cracking. Hey Slavko, welcome to the stream. So the first thing here is the new proposal for the decorators. So this has been stagnating for God knows how long. I think like 3 years or 4 years or something. It was initially introduced, yeah, I guess 3 years ago, looking by this Travis file here, maybe even more than that. And then was presented at the TC39 whenever, I guess 3 years ago as well. And it was just shut down and nothing happened to it. Even though there is a Babel plugin that implements it and people use it in quite a lot of libraries, to be honest, like the, MobX and other guys, they just use the old version of it. And yeah, it's never been accepted or discussed, or it was just dropped basically. But now we have a new version that is renamed, or at least the file was renamed to the simplified, sorry, this is the branch, right? Simplified version of it, which is due to be presented on September 2020 TC39 meeting, which basically gives us hope that we'll finally get decorators into the spec and they will finally be officially supported without any transpilation and stuff like this. Which is, yeah, I mean, it's great, right? So if you're working with classes, decorators can be quite handy, like doing this by hand. Like, it's not that, you can do this quite easily by hand, but it's just annoying and a lot of boilerplate, and decorators make it about 20 times easier, right? So it's nice to finally see some work done here, and would be very curious to see the outcome of the September 2020 TC39 meeting. If you're curious about the details of the new version, again, it's not too different from the current version, just a lot more simpler, and specifically focuses on the decorators as class elements. I believe the old one also covered the usage of decorators for basically everything, which was one of the points where it was shut down, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong here, don't take my word for that. This is what I remember from, I mean, it was like 3 years ago or something. So anyway, if you're curious, do read through the spec. It's not extremely big. Again, let's see how that goes in the September meeting. Hopefully, we'll finally get it at least to stage 2 or 3. So there we go. Next thing we got here is the article, What's New in DevTools for Microsoft Edge 86. That basically just came out, and there is quite a ton of really cool things here. So first one that I want to highlight is the emulation for the Surface Duo and Samsung Galaxy Fold devices. You can now emulate split devices in your Edge browser DevTools, which is incredibly cool. It looks like the dual pane devices are essentially going to become more widespread as the time goes forward, because a lot of companies start working on something like this, at least foldable devices, maybe not split devices, but we're going to see how that develops. And being able to just emulate the 2 screens right in your browser is really damn cool for the web development. So there we go. Hey, Brian, welcome to the stream. Other cool things include the finally fixed table copy from the console. So if you ever used console.table and tried to copy it, you know that it actually just copied it as one string, and if you paste it anywhere, it was basically you had to manually reformat it, which was incredibly annoying. And Edge 86 now finally formats that as a proper table, so you no longer have to manually do that work, and you actually get a nice formatted table, which you can just view or save or export or whatever in your editor of choice, which is quite damn nice. I think there was there something else? I don't remember if there was any other. Oh yeah, there was a really nice tool for emulating missing local fonts, which I know can be quite a problem if you are trying to do the, the universal font loading thing, and people just lack local fonts and you forgot to add some fallbacks basically. So there's a nice touch. You can also now finally emulate inactive idle users, which is super cool. So before that, testing that was a pain in it. Like, it's like, why are you not touching your computer? Well, I need to emulate an activity, so I just dropped everything and went away for 5 minutes to drink coffee, which was annoying. Now you can just do it via toggle in the DevTools. And there's also the emulation for prefers reduced data, which is quite nice. So basically you can emulate the not just poor network conditions, but also the flag prefers reduced data, which is quite nice. I don't know if it's actually shipped in, it's probably shipped in Android, but I don't know about the iOS. We're going to see about that. Anyway, it's pretty good. There's like a ton more things here, but this is sort of my highlights. So if you're curious, do check out the full article. Again, Edge has been pretty cool, and I'm really, really excited to see the Microsoft putting so much work in it, to be honest. Like it's as you might notice, I've already been using it as my primary browser for quite some time, and I don't think I'm going to go back to Chrome anytime soon. All right. That's it for this article. The final thing we got here is this tweet from awesomeness that talks about the new version of Lighthouse that is gonna recommend smaller sized libraries that improve bundle size, which is incredibly cool. So if you didn't know, the Lighthouse basically analyzes your website and tells you what improvements you can do to it, what problems are there performance-wise, and so on and so forth, right? And one of the things that it did tell you before was like, hey, you actually got a lot of really big JavaScript libraries, right? But that was it. It was just like, hey, you got this really big library, consider doing something with it, tree shaking or whatever, right? So what they do now is that in addition to that, they actually give you smaller alternatives. So here's an example on the screen where they basically say, hey, you're actually using moment.js, which is 70 kilobyte in size. Please consider using day.js, datefonts, or luxon that are 2.8 kilobyte, 18 kilobytes, or 20 kilobyte accordingly in size, and will shave you potentially, up to 67 kilobytes from your bundle size, which is incredible. There were questions from people in the thread, I think pretty much deservedly, on how exactly do they determine what is a good alternative, right? Because you have to, if you're recommending something, it has to fit the same use case, it has to have the same APIs, or at least the equivalents for them. And it's a really tough thing to do, to recommend something that, it's actually a fitting replacement, basically. But they are, like Osmani said, that they are taking this seriously, and they're going to have a procedure in place for basically vetting the alternatives in a very sort of, I would probably go say scientific manner. So they would basically be very strict about what do they call alternative. But it's a really nice addition to the Lighthouse. Like, this is really great. And, since it's a Chromium thing, it's also going to be a part of Edge, which is pretty damn great. So there we go. Right, that's it for the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Now we are coming to the releases section. So we got 3 of them here today. The first one being VSCode version 1.49, August 2020 release. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of really nice additions. So first one is the things that I want to highlight essentially is that you can now make VS Code only format text that you edit essentially on save. So before that, you only had an option to, format and save or not format and save. And sometimes it might break some things, which could be annoying, right? Especially when you're working on projects that are not yours essentially, right? And don't have, for example, pre-tier config or something like that. And now you can actually make VS Code only format whatever you modify, which is pretty damn handy. So it can reduce the annoyances of working on other people's projects without proper setup quite a bit. So I'm quite excited about that. The other cool improvements include the new, where's the link for it? The TypeScript version 4.0 support, which means that you can now have this convert to optional chaining refactoring basically for free. So the TypeScript does it for you, and now you have the inline tooltip for that. And another thing is that they now support the JS doc at deprecated tag and basically show it to you in line with this strikeout text that basically says, hey, this method is actually deprecated, so you should not be using that anymore, which is super cool. I've already seen that backfire on some people because I'm not sure if that's, their half of their code base was deprecated or there's something wrong with an editor, but that was quite amusing. Someone posted a screenshot on the Discord, I think it was Kepler, with half of an editor basically striked out because of the deprecation text. But yeah, there you go. So that's pretty exciting. Like a lot of, again, minor changes, but they're really, really cool ones. So, VS Code, again, VS Code, my favorite thing. So all of that. Let's just go to the next thing. All right, the next release is Stencil version 2.0. This actually is has been released last week, but I somehow missed it. So we are, catching up here. And yeah, it's just mostly, I guess I would call that maintenance release. And essentially it moves things such as support for older browsers like Internet Explorer 11, Edge 16, 18, Safari 10, to opt in. So you now have to explicitly opt in to build for older versions, which is basically means that you're going to get the smaller builds, right? Same goes for the ES5 and System.js builds. So if you want the older feature support, you have to opt in for that. And then there's a bunch of other minor changes. They dropped MJS, for example, which is pretty nice to see. Not a fan of that at all. And yeah, so that's basically it. Again, I know that some of you have been like, when are we going to have that damn stream with web components? We are going to have it. I finally finished with the graffiti. I'm going to talk about that a bit later today. But we are going to get into the web components and web component-based apps stream probably next week. We're going to see how that goes. So if you're curious, do check out Stencil 2.0 release. And continuing, the last release of the week we got is NgRx version 10, the new version of the state manager, reactive state manager for Angular. Can't really say much to you about it. I mean, you know, I haven't used Angular in 5 years, I guess. But I know that some of you are using it still, and you know, NgRx is a pretty damn nice solution, to be honest. So like I remember using the first version when it came out and was pretty damn life-changing. So if you are using it, make sure to check out version 10. Seems like it comes with a ton of improvements. And yeah, that's basically it for the releases. Now we are coming to the libs and demos section, and we do have, did I just open that or not? I feel like I misclicked. No, I did open that. Great. Okay, so we are coming to the libs and demos, and the first one here is the graffiti framework that I've built over the last 2 streams, and then some other additional time in basically off the stream, because I didn't want you to watch all that annoying things to do. And the graffiti is minimalistic GraphQL framework. The gist of it is that you can install graffiti as an npm package, right? Then create a schema file.js inside your project, export a mongoose schema definition from that file, and this will create a GraphQL API for you from that schema with things like automated relations between the different schemas, right? So you get like the objects nesting and all that kind of stuff. You also get plugins. You also can add manual resolvers, but essentially, you know, it's a tool to allow you to create GraphQL API in literally 10 seconds by just defining your schemas. Works pretty well. There's a whole ton of examples and docs here, so if you want to try it out, give it a shot, and do tell me what you think. I am gonna make another video on the graffiti itself, probably next week, because I want to show just how easy it is to make GraphQL API with it. Anyway, continuing, we got GBAJS 2. This is a Game Boy Advance emulator. It's actually a community fork of the original version that is basically no longer maintained, I believe, and someone just forked it, and yeah, now it's community maintained and has a ton of features and works online, so you can just play Game Boy Advance games right in the browser, including save game support and everything, which is pretty damn cool. So if you're curious how that works, do check the repo out. Next thing we got here is aniuta. This is the simplest state manager for Expo and React. So this is the fork of my state management solution called Outstated for React, but it basically adds a bit more magic. So instead of just using hooks, as it was in the case of Outstated, this one allows you to use a create store method that basically constructs the store hook, right? That you can just use in your app anywhere you want, and then you don't have to manually set up the provider and so on and so forth. So if that sounds interesting, do check out. Again, since personally, you know, after the X state for extremely complex state management, or atoms, or the Recoil, I guess, for the simpler stuff, I'm not sure I need any other solution, but if you're looking for something super simple, do check this one out. This actually looks pretty decent. Okay, continuing, we got react-voodoo. Additive and swipeable tween composition engine for React. So this is yet another, I guess, I wouldn't call it, I mean, it's not really animation, right? It's like tweening engine, essentially. So kind of animation, but more of a tweening engine for React that also works in React Native and on server side, which is pretty cool. So it basically supports the server side rendering. I guess it just renders the final state there, but you know, it looks pretty damn good. So if you are into some react-voodoo, I guess, no, that's a terrible pun. If you do want to do some React twinning and crazy animations, do check this one out. It may be the thing that you are looking for. All right. Continuing, we got let me try that again. We got airtable-dnd. This is unofficial Airtable client for Node.js, ported from airtable-dnd. I think this is the first library that I've seen ported from Deno to Node.js. So this is like, I don't think any other library was ported, the other way around, which is, this is kind of cool. So if you are using Airtable and you wanted a Node.js client for it, do check out. This seems to be pretty solid. Again, this is a backport from Deno. I assume it's not super hard to do, it wasn't super hard to port it, obviously, but yeah, that's a really nice project. So there you go. Okay, continuing, we got react-js-popup. React pop-up component, models, tooltips, and menus all in one. Seems like a super nice component for, well, models, tooltips, and menus, just 3 kilobytes, and allows you to basically do anything you can imagine, which is pretty damn handy. So there you go. If you're working with stuff like this in React, do check it out. Maybe this is exactly what you want. I actually probably should start this because I had to roll my own version of things like this in our app, which was quite a bit annoying. All right, continuing, we got an amazing library called React3Flex, which essentially adds a flexbox for React3Fiber. If you ever tried using Three.js or WebGL in general, and if you ever tried to do layouts in Three.js or 3Fiber or whatever, you know how much pain it is. Like, it's essentially just placing objects in 3D space, right? And you have to do it manually. It is not easy. Now, what those guys did is they were like, hey, let's add a flexbox in there. They took the Yoga layout, which is the Facebook's layouting engine that is used in React Native, and ported it to React3Flex. So you can now have flexbox in Three.js, which is freaking mind-blowing. It basically allows you to easily do 3D graphics using flexbox layouts, which is freaking crazy. Like, just, you can do some really fancy stuff with it in a very, very simple way. It has flex items, wrapping, positioning, whatever the hell you can imagine. It is just insane. And yeah, so, if you want to do some crazy 3D layouting, absolutely do check this out. This looks like mind-blowing things. This is from the React Spring team, by the way. So some insane work here. Really, really cool. We should probably do a stream on React 3. What do you call it? React 3. God damn it. Fiber is what I'm saying. And try to do some crazy 3D on a stream. I will be very curious to revisit that and see how much easier or harder it got over time. Right, continuing, we got Nearo. This is a React.js app for local saying, buying, and news. So this is sort of a Craigslist mixed with news app all in one, sort of learning material, I guess. Uses Firebase for storage and Algolia for search. Also uses the Google Maps for displaying the maps. So you have to have the Google Maps API key for that. But it's a nice learning material if you wanted to build an app like this. I believe it doesn't actually have any tests or anything like that. So this is sort of one downside. But other than that, seems pretty solid. So do check it out if that sounds interesting. All right. Next, we got 2 new libraries from Mr. Luke Edwards. One is called Flattie. It converts the... it basically flattens the object with a customizable glue. So you have a very nested objects with nested properties. It will basically make them flat and just concatenate the properties into a simple string, right? There are some cases where that might be useful. And then there's the opposite of that called nestie, which unflattens the object or expands the object, I guess is the right word here, from that flat notation into the real object. Yeah, I guess, there's obviously use cases for that. I just don't see them immediately, but if you know the use case, you probably know that you might need libraries like this. Both of them are super tiny, like just a few hundred bytes, and that's basically it. So if that sounds interesting, do check it out. Okay, next thing we got here is functional, common functional program. Let me try that again. Common functional programming algebraic data types for JavaScript that is compatible with most modern browsers and Deno. So it's essentially a bunch of, monads that you can use for functional programming, stuff like maybe monads, stuff like type factories, either monads, IO, task, and all that kind of stuff. So if you are very heavily into functional programming and wanted some monads in your Deno or maybe in modern browser, do check it out. This might help you. All right. Next thing we got here is ngrok plugin for VS Code that literally allows you to forward your current server, whatever that is, using ngrok, all from VS Code browser. If you never used ngrok, it's essentially a tiny tunnel utility that allows you to expose your localhost server to the internet using ngrok.io domain. Can be very handy for short demos. I mean, generally it's, easier to just rent a very tiny VM for like $3 and just deploy there. But if you just need to show someone something and you don't want to fiddle a lot with the VMs, this is a really nice option of doing that. And now you can use this plugin to just do it from VS Code, which is pretty damn handy. Okay. And the last demo we got here for today is tailwind.ink. This is an open source color palette generator for Tailwind. I mean, again, you probably can use it not just for Tailwind, but for pretty much anything, right? Because it just gives you a set of colors, but it does give you a Tailwind config that you can just basically copy and paste. And then you have this palette in your Tailwind, which is super handy. And yeah, it does a decent job, I guess, generating the color palette. So it's not amazing. And if you get a professional designer, it's obviously going to be a lot better. But if you don't have a designer and you just want a nice set of colors, this is actually super cool. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, do check Tailwind.ink out. It's also open source on GitHub. So if you're curious as to how exactly it was made, do check this one out. There's source code and everything, so you can just reuse that or fork it or whatever. Okay, that's it for the libs and demos. Last thing we got here for today is in Sealy section, and it's called squat captcha, and it's a captcha that forces you to do 10 squats to continue. I mean, it's like, I don't know why this exists, but it's quite amusing, and it's, my guess is that it uses TensorFlow. There was some models that basically detect the human posture, and there was quite a ton of demos that basically showed you how to do like stuff like push-ups, squat detection, and so on and so forth. But if you ever wanted to make people sweat to actually view your website, now you can literally do that. So that's the thing. And there's a demo, and there's the blog post on basically with a write-up on how exactly it works and what was made there. I found it to be pretty silly and pretty amusing and also quite cool. So that sounds interesting. Do check this one out. And that is it from my side for today, folks. There was BxJS Weekly episode 139. If you have any questions or suggestions, now is the time to throw them into the chat. If no, then we can just wrap it up here for today. Again, all the links are available on GitHub, building X with JS/BxJS Weekly. The link should be in the description to the YouTube video or to the channel description on Twitch. The links will also be available on bxjs.dev once the website rebuilds. And yeah, that's basically it. You can join our Discord chat to talk about stuff, any of this JavaScript or video games if you like to, or just, screw around basically. And you can follow me on Twitter for various JavaScript, video games, and other bollocks. You can subscribe to the Telegram channel where I gather the links over the week duration, and this basically contains unfiltered links. So some of them do not make it here to the podcast. If you want to read those as well, then this is the place to be. And I guess that's basically it. What's on Wednesday? I am not 100% sure yet, but it's either going to be web components or something else. I haven't completely decided yet, but I've been postponing the web component stream for so long that I feel like I should finally do that at, soon-ish. So likely web components. Okay, any more questions, suggestions, or we'll basically just wrap it up here and go have a lunch or something, I guess. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Meanwhile, yes, the podcast is also available in the audio format. So if you are just want to listen to this or older episodes or whatever, you can just go to Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, whatever. It's everywhere, and just listen to it there. Although I don't know how much better it is than watching it on YouTube, to be honest. But that's the thing. It's available. Right. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions or suggestions. If you, for whatever reason, want to ask them, just join the Discord and poke me there. I would be more than happy to chat. Once again, thank you for all. Well, let me try that again. Thank you folks very much for watching, for your continued support. Have an awesome rest of the weekend or rest of the week, and I see you on Wednesday for whatever the dev stream we decide to do.